Hi, this is Julie Gizzi. I'm an executive director with the Pampered Chef, and today I'm going to teach you how to make artisan bread. Making bread is one of the most satisfying things ever. It smells so good, it tastes wonderful, but it does take a long time, doesn't it? Well, today I'm going to teach you 3 easy steps that will take about 5 minutes of active work time to produce a beautiful loaf of bread. So we're going to start first with our stainless mixing bowls. These come in a set of 3. I'm going to use the smallest one to get us started. What I love about these bowls is that they have silicone grips on the bottom so they don't slide when you're mixing with them. And they're stainless steel, measurements are inside, you've got pour spout and a thumb holder. So first thing we're going to do is get 3 cups of flour, and I'm going to use our measuring cups that have this great built-in leveler. And so you want to grab some flour and use your leveler. We need just 3 cups. Now there's 2 versions of this recipe, and I'm going to teach you the faster of the 2. And so this can be ready to eat fairly quickly once you get your dough started. Okay, so all we need to add to this is 1.5 teaspoons of salt, 1.5 teaspoons of yeast, and 1.5 cups of water to the 3 cups of flour. You want to use active dry yeast. I buy it in a jar because you can measure out exactly how much you like. So if you buy the packets, there's going to be waste. So 1.5 teaspoons of yeast. And then if you like to make an herb bread, or if you like cinnamon raisin bread, that's when you would add in your other additions right now. So my husband loves the rosemary herb seasoning in there, so I'll add 2 tablespoons of that, or 2 tablespoons of our Italian seasoning. My son and I like cinnamon raisin bread, so when I make that, I'll add 2 teaspoons of cinnamon and then 1/2 cup or so of dried raisins. And then you're going to add 1.5 cups of water. And these easy read measuring cups are wonderful because they're angled and you just pour in your liquids and you can see exactly how much you have. They come in a set of 3, so you get a 4 cup, 2 cup, and a 1 cup, and then this little one is sold separate for smaller things like vinegar and vanilla and that sort of thing. Okay, so unlike most bread where you have to knead for 8 to 10 minutes until elastic, there's none of that with this technique. You simply mix it all up until it comes together, and you shouldn't see any more dry flour specks. Your dough is going to look kind of wet or a little bit shaggy, and that's perfect. Just trust it. Once it comes together, you're done. So I'm using our bamboo spoon to mix it all up. And you can kind of see it's sort of shaggy. And that was the hardest part of this whole thing. Now we just cover it and let sit for 2 hours on the countertop. At the end of that 2 hours, you've got 2 choices. If you want to bake it right away, you can. After the second rising, or after 2 hours of resting, you can put it in the fridge and use it for up to between a week to 2 weeks. I prefer not much past a week. The longer it stays in your fridge, the more it's going to develop that sourdough flavor. So let's pretend I've got another batch started here. This one has been resting for a couple of hours, and let's pretend I want to go ahead and bake this right away, which we're going to do. You're going to notice something different about this dough. It's kind of flat. It's got bubbles on it, and it looks really wet, and that's exactly what it's supposed to look like. It's definitely a different technique than you might have used with bread before, but it makes a fabulous loaf. I'm going to grab some flour and stick it on here. Because it's so wet, you want a generous amount of flour on your mat. Now this mat that I'm using is a silicone mat. It rolls up really nice for storage. It's great for sugar cookies and rolling pizza crust and doing things like your pie crust, and of course bread works great for that. So I'm just gonna flip this bread dough out. It's really sticky. Okay, all right. So there's the empty bowl. If you're going to make more bread, you can even add more ingredients to that same bowl, and those little bits of dough that are in there already kind of create a bit of a starter. Okay, so you want to make sure your hands are well floured. Just flip it. This dough has actually been in the fridge, so it's kind of cold. And if it's sticking to your hands at all, you just want to add more flour. So just flatten it out, fold it into thirds. Okay, flatten it some more, fold it into thirds again, and then just start forming it into a loaf. That's all there is to it. Okay, so I've got my deep covered baker. This is the magic pot. This is what is going to make that dough fabulous. And so most of the time when you bake with your deep covered baker, you won't put anything in there, no parchment paper or anything. But in this case, this is a really wet dough, and if you don't put that parchment in there, it can stick. So just put the seam side down on your dough on that parchment, cover it, let it rest for between 1 to 2 hours. It doesn't have to be exact. And after it's rested for that long, you're going to put it into an oven that's at 425 degrees for 30 minutes. Uncover it and let it bake for another 10 minutes until it's nice and golden. So this loaf here is finished. It just came out of the oven a little while ago. So let's go ahead and cut into it. This is one of our newer cutting boards. It's a cutting board with grooves. So this wide side is perfect for pineapples and watermelon and things like that, juicy things, and it'll drip right into there. But this side is for bread. So you've got little guide marks for slicing your bread. So you want to let your bread rest for a little bit. It helps make it easier for cutting, and it's important that you use a good serrated knife. Now this one here is our forge knife, and from end to end it's a single piece of metal. It's a fabulous knife, nice and heavy, and a good sharp bread knife is essential because you don't want to squish down your bread. So just saw back and forth, and you're ready for making sandwiches or just eating with dinner. And it's just a beautiful crusty loaf. And that only took about, I don't know, maybe 40 cents to make. What's different about this bread, and you can kind of see the bubbles, I don't know if that comes across so much in the video, but because that bread was really, the dough was kind of wet, with the baker, that steam stays trapped inside of your baker, so it produces a really nice chewy crust and tender inside. So it's going to taste like those artisan breads that you can get at professional bakeries. So thank you so much for joining me today for making artisan bread. I hope that you'll enjoy experimenting with these with your families. If you make smaller loaves, keep in mind we do have a second baker. This is the small round baker that's available. It bakes exactly the same way as our famous deep covered baker, just half your portions and you'll be ready to go. So thanks for joining us today. Enjoy bread baking.